Smoke moved like a slow river across the alien sky, the color of bruise and iron. The city below shaking as towers fell one by one. Lights dying, voices breaking. He stood at the mouth of an underground stairwell with dust on his tongue and heat on his face, listening to the scream of sirens and the harder sound beneath it. The deep crash of weapons that came from far above, from ships that looked like black knives hanging over the clouds. Streets that once held markets and soft music were now full of broken glass and the smell of burning plastic. People ran in crooked lines, some barefoot, some bleeding, some carrying bundles that held all they owned. A child clutched a metal toy with both hands as if the toy could turn into armor. An old woman pressed a scarf against her ear to stop the ringing. A father dragged a door to make a stretcher because the hospital had no stretchers left. The air tasted like coins and smoke. In the command hall under the main square, a thin technician, with ash in his hair and fear in his eyes, leaned over a console that flickered on and off. He tapped a key, then another, then hit the side of the panel like it might wake if he touched it harder. Around him officers argued in broken sentences. Maps showing red arrows turned into gray squares when the power dipped. The oldest officer, a man with a scar that ran from ear to collar, put both hands on the table and said in a voice that shook but did not fail, "Send the SOS. Send it now, every channel, every band, every old network that still remembers who we are." The technician nodded and began to type. His fingers clumsy but sure. The message had to be simple. Simple survived. Complex died. Help us. Our cities are burning. Our defenses are broken. Coordinates follow. Please help. He did not like the word please, but he typed it anyway because pride helps no one when the ceiling is falling. Above the city, the enemy fleet hung like a second sky. Wide and cold, their weapons rained. Lines of light that cut buildings open like fruit. A school collapsed into its own dust. A bridge folded with a long sigh. The enemy voice spoke once on every public screen. "Surrender now. Your leaders cannot save you." The voice was smooth and clean, like a hand that has never done hard work. Then the screens went dead and only the glow of fire remained. In a shelter under an old theater, dozens of people sat on the floor hugging their knees and whispering small prayers. A teacher kept 10 children counting backward from 100 to keep them from hearing the screams from the street above. A baker passed pieces of stale bread like it was treasure. A medic with shaking hands wrapped a bandage around a stranger's leg and told him to breathe slow, breathe slow. In the plaza outside, a fountain that once threw water high into the light now threw steam because a hot shard had fallen through its heart. The technician sent the SOS into the dark. The words left their dying network. Like a flock of thin birds, jumping from relay to relay, some relays responded, some were already cold. He watched the progress bar crawl like a wounded animal and whispered to the machine, "Go, go, go." In the west quarter, a defense cannon fired one last burst at a target too high to see. Its barrel glowed, then cracked. The recoil kicked a crew member off the platform. Another soldier grabbed his jacket and pulled him back by force and love. Across the river, a row of apartments burned like candles laid on their side. Balconies fell with people still on them. Someone shouted a name again and again as if names could make stone grow hands. The ground shook. Dust fell from ceiling pipes in the command hall. The old officer glanced up but did not move. The technician hit send again on a smaller packet. Then again on a packet that was only numbers. He stripped the message down to coordinates and the word help because sometimes the only way to fly far is to travel light. On the temple hill, the wind turned and pushed the smoke toward the harbor. Sirens changed pitch. A long rising note that felt like it might never stop. A line of evac buses rolled through a square and a walking machine with too many legs stepped out from behind a fallen statue. It opened its mouth and fire came out. The first bus became a box of light. The second swerved into a stone pillar and stuck like an insect. People spilled out, some on fire, some silent. A small boy climbed onto the roof of the second bus and held out his hands because he thought someone might lift him. A human shape in a dark suit appeared on a nearby roof. No one knew who. The shape raised a tube and a line of white fire went into the machine's throat. The machine folded. The roof figure vanished into smoke. Miracles sometimes looked like tricks and tricks sometimes looked like miracles. The SOS reached a cold boy that drifted near the system's edge. The boy blinked awake and asked for a password that nobody alive remembered. Then it shrugged in its machine way and forwarded the message because even a machine knows a plea when it hears one. Deeper under the city, in a tunnel that smelled of old oil and fear, a group of civilian guards stacked furniture across a service door to slow an advancing squad. Their leader's hands shook as he set a torch to melt a pipe and make steam. He told the youngest among them that fear and courage are twins. One holds the other's hand. They nodded like this was a lesson in a classroom and not a lesson under a ceiling that might fall. Above ground the enemy opened their carrier bellies and dropped more machines. Some walked, some rolled, some flew. All of them obeyed the same calm rule: break what still stands, make the living quiet. On the far ridge a heavy weapon lit the sky and cut a line across the harbor where ships once slept. The water jumped as if startled, then lay flat again with a film of oil on its face. The technician felt the floor tilt. He gripped the console to stay upright. The SOS signal map showed 3 green dots where there should be 10. He rerouted. He begged the dead relays to wake. He pushed power from lights into the transmitter. The room went dark except for the screen. A sound like a long sigh rolled through the hall and someone whispered the word collapse. The ceiling held. The officer grunted, "Keep going, boy." And the boy kept going because that is what boys do when old men ask them to. In the alley by the library a mother found her daughter under a wall of books that had fallen like a soft landslide. The child was coughing but alive. The mother laughed and cried and told her the books saved her. And for a heartbeat the war felt like a story where words have weight and walls have mercy. A cluster of med drones tried to land in the Central Park and a wave of enemy fire turned them into white flowers that bloomed and vanished. A medic shouted something angry at the sky and then went back to stitching a wound that would not stop bleeding. The SOS left the system. It passed the moon of salt and the belt of iron and the dark station where smugglers once traded quiet jokes. It whispered past a listening post built by a government that no longer existed. It reached the long black between stars where only math and memory live. In that black the message did not slow because there is no wind there. Only the will of the senders and the attention of the receivers. Far away, on a blue world most aliens only spoke of in warnings. An array of human dishes turned like sunflowers that follow a star. A broken whisper arrived. Then another. Then the shape of meaning behind the noise. A technician on that world raised his head and said one word: inbound. And a room full of people forgot their coffee and their jokes and their sleep. Back on the burning planet the enemy voice spoke again. Surrender or suffer. The word suffer was smooth as glass. A soldier with a cracked visor spat black dust and said to no one, "We are already there." In the shelter under the theater the teacher's voice began to fray but the children kept counting because rules are rafts in flooded rooms. 90, 89, 88. The baker gave the last crust to a woman who used to buy his best cakes. They looked at each other and did not speak about before. In the command hall the technician saw one of his outbound packets bounce back with a strange mark beside it. A mark he had only seen in old training videos, a human root tag. His hands froze for a breath. Then he sent everything again with the mark on top. The old officer leaned in, his eyes wide for the first time in a day. Did someone hear? The technician did not answer because answers break if you say them too soon. Above the city the smoke thinned for a moment and he saw the stars. Not many, only 3 bright points through the ash. He thought of his mother pointing at those same stars on quiet nights and naming them in the old language. He thought of the taste of tea that was not made from dirty water. He thought of a street where shoes did not crunch on glass. He blinked and the smoke closed and the stars were gone and the sound of falling metal returned. In a courtyard by the museum a line of enemy infantry marched with their guns low. They did not run because they had not yet learned fear of this place. A single defender with a wounded leg fired from behind a statue. He hit no one and the line turned and raised their guns. Before they fired a friendly bolt from a hidden roof hit the ground in front of them and flashed so bright they could not see. By the time their eyes cleared the wounded defender had crawled into a doorway. Small victories are still victories. The SOS became a thin thread stretched across a cold ocean. At the far end of that thread someone pulled. Someone said, "We hear you." But the words were still too faint to be real. The technician's screen blinked once, then again, then held steady on a strange clean tone he had never seen from his own broken equipment. He wanted to shout but his voice failed. He swallowed and pressed the key to open a return channel. His fingers hovered. What do you say to the dark when the dark talks back? He said coordinates. He said enemy count. He said our shields are gone and our children are in basements and our rivers are on fire. He said please one more time and did not care who heard him beg. Above the square a walking machine stepped over a row of bodies and aimed at the stair where people were still climbing. The technician saw it on the corner camera and sent the only drone he had left. A small scout with no gun. He flew it into the machine's mouth and jammed the throat. The machine fired once, then choked, then died with a scream like a train braking. A woman at the top of the stairs covered her face, then kept moving because movement was life. The enemy carriers shifted formation. Tired of slow killing, they drew together for the final strike. A light gathered under their bellies, bright enough to paint the river white. The oldest officer whispered something soft, a name maybe, or a place. The technician watched the power bars on the transmitter fall like sand through a glass. He yanked a panel, ripped a cable, shoved it into a port where it did not belong. The console sparked and then burned his hand. He did not let go. The SOS held steady for one more long breath. Then another. He told himself that someone, somewhere, was listening in a room that did not shake, in a chair that did not slide. He told himself that help moves slow until it moves fast. That history turns like a heavy door. Stuck. Stuck, stuck, and then suddenly open. He said the words again into the mic. Help us. We are falling. And for a heartbeat the city went quiet. Not truly quiet, not safe. But a strange pause like the world took a breath and waited. And in that breath he thought he heard a new sound under the old ones. A low distant hum that was not their enemy. Not their machines. Something else moving far above the smoke. A sound too small to trust and too big to ignore. The hook pulled tight inside his chest. He looked up even though there was nothing to see yet. He whispered to the air like a child at a window on a night of storms, "Please," and the silence that followed felt like a question that wanted an answer. The kind of silence that comes just before the sky decides to break. The city burned through the night. Flames licking broken towers, smoke crawling through every street like a living thing. The survivors huddled in cellars and tunnels, their bodies trembling with hunger, fear, and exhaustion. Above them the enemy fleet moved like a ceiling of knives, dark shapes blotting out the stars. Yet far beyond the ruined skies, the desperate SOS had already escaped their system, rushing into the endless black, carrying the weight of a dying world. In the underground command hall the technician stared at his cracked screen. Blood on his fingertips from wires he had stripped bare to keep the transmitter alive. His heart hammered in his chest as he watched the small green icon flicker again. That flicker was not from his broken console. It was something else, a return signal, faint, almost drowned in static, but real. His voice cracked as he shouted for the old officer, who struggled to his feet and leaned close, eyes wide for the first time in days. The technician whispered, "Someone heard us." The words felt heavy, like a secret too fragile to speak, above the planet in the dark between stars. The SOS struck a listening array hidden on the far edge of human space. The array woke with a low hum, its machines whispering to one another. The signal was faint, broken, half drowned. But the meaning was clear: help us, our cities burn, we cannot hold. Within minutes alarms lit inside a mountain on Earth where the Deathworlder fleet slept. Officers ran down steel corridors, boots striking in unison. Command screens filled with alien words begging for life. A scarred admiral read the report with his jaw tight, his voice steady as he said only 3 words: launch. The Armada, deep hangars groaned open. Carriers the size of cities powered their engines. Destroyers hummed like angry beasts. Cruisers loaded with fire woke from silence. In orbit above Earth, shadows larger than continents turned toward the stars. While inside each ship, men and women strapped into seats, eyes hard, hearts steady. Some kissed lockets, some whispered names, some closed their eyes and let the hum of engines drown out the fear. No one asked why. Because when humanity heard a cry for help, they did not ask, they answered. Back on the alien world the technician clutched his headset, hearing faint pulses of human code, too broken to understand, but enough to tell him that something vast was already moving. He looked at the old officer, tears in his smoke-stained eyes, and said, "They are coming." The officer nodded once, slow and certain, as if he had always believed this moment would arrive. Above them the enemy fleet prepared for its final strike, unaware that far across the stars, the Deathworlder Armada had already set its course. Engines burning, a storm on its way, silent but unstoppable. And though the alien survivors could not see it yet, hope had already begun to return, like the first breath after nearly drowning, fragile, desperate, but alive. Engines woke like giants under iron skin, their voices deep enough to shake oceans. In Earth's orbit the Deathworlder Armada gathered, carriers sliding into formation like mountains set free from gravity, destroyers and cruisers weaving between them with sharp precision. Hangars roared with light as fighters lined up, wings gleaming. Pilots strapping in with jaws set tight. The air inside those ships buzzed with purpose. No speeches, no music, only the rhythm of orders and the steady beat of boots. In the command deck of the flagship the admiral stood silent, his scarred face watching a wall of data streams. alien voices crying for help again and again. His hand rested on the console, steady as stone. He gave no speech because speeches waste seconds. He simply said, "Set jump coordinates," and every officer on deck answered. With a sharp nod, across the fleet, weapons came alive, missiles slid into bays, railguns loaded, shields rose with a hum that filled the bones of every soldier. Med bays lit with red lamps, doctors and nurses laying out bandages and stretchers as calmly as if they were setting tables for a meal. Because they knew what was coming. The Armada was a storm, and storms never hesitate. Back on the alien world, defenders dragged themselves into ruined streets. Their rifles bent, their armor cracked. Their eyes hollow, they whispered that no one would come. Yet some still lifted their weapons toward the sky, hoping to hold one more street, one more hour. Civilians in shelters clutched each other, listening to the thud of enemy machines closing in. Mothers whispered lullabies that were drowned out by the rumble of tanks. Children covered their ears. A single father stared at the ceiling, whispering to himself, "Please, anyone." While above them the enemy tightened the noose, their command. Ships glowing with cruel light, their generals laughing in calm voices. They believed the planet was theirs already. They did not look behind them. They did not watch the stars beyond. But far in the black a ripple spread, the first tier of jump drives carving into space. The Armada slipped forward, steel shadows sliding between stars, their formation precise, their purpose clear. The galaxy would soon learn that when humans moved, they moved not as soldiers alone but as predators, not as allies but as executioners, and though the alien survivors on the burning world could not yet see it, the sky above them was already changing. The storm was coming, and nothing could stand against it. On the broken surface of the alien world, night fell heavy, yet the fire from the sky never stopped. The enemy pressed harder, their walkers stomping through ash, their artillery pounding the last strongholds until the ground itself felt hollow. Defenders clung to rifles that sparked when fired. Their shields long dead, they fought with scraps and courage, some whispering prayers, some whispering curses, all knowing this was the edge of the end. In the shelters civilians huddled closer, each blast above them sending dust into their lungs. Mothers covered children with their bodies. Fathers pressed hands against doors as if their weight alone could hold them shut. Yet in every pocket of fear small acts of defiance still bloomed. A medic shared the last vial of painkiller with 3. Wounded, an old woman gave her shawl to a crying boy. A soldier with blood running down his cheeks smiled to calm a stranger though his teeth shook. In the ruined plaza a captain of the alien guard gave the order no one wanted. Prepare to surrender. His voice broke as he said it. The word felt like poison in the air. But even as it was spoken a whisper moved through the streets. They are coming, humans are coming. Nobody knew who had started it. Maybe a technician who had seen the signal bounce. Maybe a desperate refugee clinging to hope. But the whisper spread, a flicker in the dark. Above them the enemy ships tightened formation. Their commanders smiling with cruel certainty. Their voices echoed across comms. Finish this world, leave nothing alive. But at the same moment far beyond their sight, human drives burned white. The Deathworlder Armada slipping closer, faster, carrying fire and silence both. And though no alien eye could yet see it, the balance of the galaxy was already bending. The invaders thought themselves hunters, but dawn would show them they had become prey. The sky broke like glass when the first human ships arrived. One moment only smoke and enemy shadows. The next moment a wall of metal that moved with purpose. Carriers as big as cities slid out of the high clouds, their bellies glowing. Destroyers formed a sharp ring around them. Cruisers rolled on their spines to show rows of silent guns. The air trembled, the ground hummed. Every window that still had glass began to sing. On the streets below people froze with hands over their mouths. Defenders stared upward with eyes that stung from ash and disbelief. Even the enemy guns hesitated, a heartbeat too long. Because the shape of these ships told a clear truth. Something had changed. In the ruined command hall the old officer pushed himself to his feet. His fingers white on the table edge. The technician wiped smoke from his screen and saw clean signals stack in a column. Human codes, human time marks, human orders spoken in short calm words. Hold positions, mark civilians, do not crowd the streets. Shields will cover the plaza in 20 seconds. And even as he read it a cold blue light blossomed above the square. A dome falling into place with a soft hiss like rain. The first enemy volley slammed down and broke against it. Sparks running like water over glass. Someone in the shelter laughed and then clapped a hand over their own mouth because laughing felt dangerous. Above the city, a human carrier slid sideways and opened like a door. Attack craft poured out in a clean line, not rushing, not noisy. Each one cut a smooth path through the heated air and dropped to a set height. Their wings flickering as vents tasted the wind. Pilots spoke to each other in numbers and directions, voices steady. A hospital roof needed a shield. A firebreak needed cutting through 3 blocks. A bridge full of evacuees needed a smoke screen. Orders went out. Actions followed. It felt like watching a machine built from brave hearts. The enemy tried to lift a heavy beam weapon for a killing shot at the shielded plaza. 3 human fighters crossed a perfect triangle over the weapon. Their rails whispered. The weapon folded in half. The triangle broke and reformed over the next target. On the river, a walking machine with too many legs tried to step over a line of trapped buses. A human gunship rolled on its side and put a chain of bright teeth along the machine's knee. Joints, the legs snapped. The machine knelt like a thing remembering prayer. Civilians ran from under it and did not look back. The enemy commander shouted for the planetary batteries to wake and fire blind into the smoke. A human jammer kissed their targeting with lies. The batteries saw ghosts running where there were none and stayed quiet where the Real ships moved. In the east quarter, a defender with a broken rifle pointed at the sky and whispered a word from old stories, Deathworlders, and the boy crouched beside him asked what it meant. The defender did not answer because meaning walked above them, writing itself in light. The flagship took station over the northern hills, her hull throwing a long shadow like evening over a battlefield that still thought it was noon. On her command deck, the admiral watched traffic flow across 3 panes of air. Enemy formations like knots in a net. Civilian clusters like small warm islands. He lifted a hand. Destroyers to cut the top lane. Cruisers angle 20 degrees and cut the factories. Carriers hold belly doors closed until ground batteries are dead. No hero runs. No wasted shots. This is not a duel. This is a finish, and the fleet moved. The first salvo left the rails with a quiet that did not match the distance it crossed. Needles of light threaded the sky, crossing in a weave that looked almost gentle. Then enemy hulls opened like fruit cut by a clean blade, no fire, only dimming, then falling, silence between strikes. Then the sound came late, a long rolling thunder that arrived after the work was already done. The enemy tried to scatter into low orbits and hide behind the curve of the world. Human destroyers were already there, their drives stuttering in a rhythm that pulled them tight around the fleeing ships. A captain on the enemy side ordered a charge straight down into the city to make the humans choose between the sky and the streets. A human cruiser dropped on its side between the enemy and the roofs, and took 3 heavy blows across its plates, then answered with a single shot that turned the charging ship into bright gravel. The cruiser's captain whispered an apology to the city for the noise and drifted sideways to block the next foolish move. In the plaza, the blue shield rippled as shrapnel rained against it. A child reached up to touch the light and a human medic caught his wrist and shook her head. Wait, stay low, we will drop the shield when the street is clean. A minute later the medic was hauling a folded stretcher through rubble with a local nurse at her side, showing her how to clamp a line with 2 fingers and a strip of cloth. Small lessons under a big sky. In the West Market, the enemy had kept a group of civilians in a ring of wire to use as cover. 2 human engineers rode a drone down into the alley and popped smoke canisters like seeds. Grey flowers bloomed, light turned soft. The engineers moved through it with visors on manual and cutters in their hands. Wire fell in coils. The civilians vanished into the smoke and came out behind a portable shield where a chaplain without arms held a water pouch in his teeth for a crying girl. The enemy commander sent his last reserves to the spaceport dome, stacking bodies and guns under the humming blue bowl. He broadcast on all channels that any shot at the dome would kill thousands. The flagship watched for 2 breaths, then spoke. Ground teams prepare knife work, heavy guns hold. We keep the bowl whole. And the city began to learn a new rhythm. Fire then quiet. Scream then order. Panic then hands lifting. Everywhere human squads moved like rivers finding the low lines. 2 steps. Stop. Listen. 2 steps. Stop. Clear corner. Mark door. Someone spoke a name and someone answered. Here. In the hills above the hydro stations, the enemy pushed a last line of walkers toward the pipeline. Their plan simple. Break the water and starve the city. Glide drones woke from rock shadows, fell like silver birds. With no sound, the first rank of walkers went to their knees. The second rank stopped. Not brave now, only confused. And then heavy cannon on the high ridge spoke a single word in iron. No. Back over the river, 2 human craft slipped under a bridge where evac boats were caught on ropes. One pilot stepped out onto a wing and cut a line by hand. pulling 4 people into his craft with broken fingers and a jaw set hard against pain. He took the blast from an enemy rifle on his side plate and rode the wing back into the air like a farmer lifting a child over a fence. In the command hall, the technician's screen filled with green markers, small ones for safe corridors, larger ones for aid stations, a thick one for the shield line. He pushed updates to battered wrist pads worn by local guards, and they nodded to themselves like tired students who finally understood the lesson. The old officer looked at the ceiling and whispered a word from home, not a military word, a kitchen word, a garden word, because the smell of boiling water and the whisper of leaves felt suddenly possible again. The enemy tried a different cruelty, drilling under the shelters to flood them. Human sappers were already in the drains with headlamps and ropes. They found the charges and smiled without humor. Not today, they said, and turned bombs into scrap. The flagship opened wideband and spoke one more time to the invaders. Stand down, power off, step away from weapons. Transmit crew counts, any shot after. This mark earned silence. The timestamp rolled across 1,000 screens. Some enemy captains spat curses at it. Some stared at it until the numbers blurred. Some closed their eyes and sent the code for surrender as if casting a ring into a river. Above the mountains, a hidden enemy cutter roared out of the rock with a mouth like a torch, heading for the heart of the city. A rail round from orbit placed a wall of pressure in front of its face. The cutter broke its own teeth on the air and rolled into the hillside, leaving a smoking scar that looked like a wound the planet had chosen for itself. On the streets, human soldiers lifted their visors just enough for civilians to see eyes, not masks. A boy who had not spoken in 2 days stared at a trooper's face and whispered thank you like it was a secret he was scared to spend. The trooper nodded once and pointed him toward a line of water and bread. No speeches, only motion, only work. The first enemy carrier lit its drives to run and found 3 destroyers. Already parked in its path like doors, it turned its guns toward the city in a final small act of spite. The flagship's voice did not change. Remove their teeth. The destroyer's guns whispered. The carrier became pieces that fell in a slow rain, none of them large enough to hurt the roofs below. The city watched that rain and learned a lesson about precision that felt like mercy in the middle of wrath. On the far side of the river, the defender with the broken rifle felt his hands stop shaking. He lifted the weapon out of habit, though it could no longer fire. He realized he was breathing without counting, realized he was standing without the thought of falling, realized that the word surrender had been pushed out of the day by another word he did not yet fully trust. Survive. The technician leaned back from his console, tears carving clean lines through ash on his cheeks. He had no grand lines to say, only a simple sentence to the room and to himself and to whoever might need it. They came. Then he bent to his work again because the sky was still loud and the streets were still dangerous and people still needed numbers and arrows and calm voices. Above everything, the Deathworlder Armada held its place like a mountain that had learned to float. Every ship in the right slot. Every gun pointed the right way. Every heart beating to the same quiet drum. The enemy had arrived like fire, hot and proud, but now they moved like smoke, thin and unsure. And the city that had expected to die felt its spine returning bone by bone. The day stretched forward, not safe yet, not easy, but possible, and that word felt like sunlight after a long dark room, warm on skin, bright on stone, strong enough to make people look up and believe there would be another morning. Night crawled across the shattered planet again. But it was no longer the same kind of night. Yesterday the dark had belonged to the invaders, their ships glowing above the clouds, their machines prowling the streets with cruel precision, but now the dark trembled with a different weight. The Deathworlder Armada hung in orbit, their engines like steady thunder, their shadows falling across broken mountains and ruined rivers. Below, the survivors felt the difference. They huddled still in shelters, but the air inside was lighter. The hopeless silence was gone, replaced by whispers. They came, they came. The words moved through tunnels like sparks through dry wood. The invaders heard those whispers too, and, for the first time, their steps were less certain, their commands less sharp, their confidence shaken. In the underground command hall, the technician leaned against his console, every muscle sore, his eyes red from smoke and fatigue. Yet he would not leave the screen. Human signals flowed now in steady streams. Orders given in clipped voices, each word sharp as steel, corridors secured, civilians marked for evac, hold your positions, aid incoming. The old officer sat near him, head tilted back against the wall, but his lips still moved, murmuring directions, reminders, warnings, his hand tapping against his knee with each new update. Because even broken men keep working when their people need them. Above, the humans did not rest, they pressed. Destroyers tightened the noose around the remaining enemy ships. Cruisers cut escape routes clean. Fighters hunted stragglers in the upper air. Ground teams moved block by block, their boots crunching glass, their visors glowing faint as they searched every ruined corner, each step slow, careful, deliberate. They cleared buildings of traps, pulled survivors out of cellars, gave water, patched wounds, their voices steady, never rushed. Breathe, follow the light. You are safe now, in the hills to the east. The enemy rallied a last desperate strike. Their heavy walkers pushed toward the hydro stations that fed what little water the city had left. Their plan was cruel but simple: break the water, starve the survivors. But the humans had already placed silver drones in the ridges, drones that waited, patient as hunters in tall grass. The moment the walkers' heat touched the sensors, the drones woke, falling in silence, cutting the first rank apart before the second could react. Then the ridgeline cannons spoke, each shot a hammer, each blast a reminder that the high ground no longer belonged to the invaders. The survivors in the valley below looked up, their mouths open, not cheering, not yet, but staring as if the impossible had been made flesh. Back in the city, human medics worked beside alien nurses, sharing tools, trading gestures, pointing and nodding because language was no longer needed. One human held a light while an alien stitched. An alien carried water while a human splintered a leg. Small rhythms of unity built in the middle of ruins. In the spaceport district, the enemy gathered civilians under a shield dome, trying to use them as cover. They broadcast on all frequencies that any attack would mean slaughter. The humans did not fire, they planned. They whispered to each other in calm tones: jam the tower, blind the dome, cut the seams, move fast when it falters. Then the storm began, smoke-filled alleys. Jammers whispered lies into the dome's sensors. Engineers crawled under wires and slid needles into circuits. The shield stuttered, not gone but trembling. Then a rail round fell beside the control tower, just enough to shock the metal into forgetting itself. For one breath a seam opened. And in that breath the humans flowed through, shadows in the mist, dragging civilians out in chains of hands. One child, then 10, then 100. The seam closed, opened again, closed, opened. Each time another wave poured out. The enemy tried to fire into the chaos but found their weapons blocked by humming shields carried on human backs. In minutes the hostages were free. The dome shivered and shattered into harmless light. The invaders dropped their rifles. Too tired, too broken to keep. Pretending they held power, in the plaza a boy lifted his head and saw a human trooper remove his visor just enough to show eyes. The boy whispered thank you. The trooper only nodded once and moved on. Because the work was not finished, not yet. The technician stared at his screen as green markers multiplied, each one a safe zone, each one a life pulled from death. He pressed his palm against the glass as if he could feel them through it. The old officer laughed once, low and rough, not from humor but from something deeper, relief breaking through stone. Above the world, the admiral of the Deathworlder Armada sent one more broadcast, calm, quiet, final. Your fleets are gone, your threats empty, surrender now or vanish. And in the dark across the planet, enemy captains heard those words. Some cursed, some wept, some shut their eyes. But more and more sent the code for surrender. The war was not yet over. But it was ending, and for the first time in living memory, the survivors of that world believed they might see a dawn not written in fire. The ruins of the alien city glowed faintly under the broken moonlight. The smoke thinned but never fully cleared. The smell of fire lingered in every street. The sound of footsteps echoed where laughter once lived. But now those footsteps were different, heavier, steadier, disciplined. Human soldiers walked through the wreckage with rifles across their chests. Their armor scratched and blackened from battle. Their visors glowing as they scanned alleys and doorways, every step measured, every turn precise. Behind them moved the alien defenders who had survived, eyes hollow but shoulders straighter now. They followed the humans not as prisoners but as students, watching how they moved, learning how survival could feel like certainty. The invaders still held fragments of power, small groups in the factories, hidden squads in the hills, desperate pockets clinging to weapons that shook in their hands, but the tide had turned. The Deathworlder Armada did not rest. Destroyers hung in low orbit. Like walls of steel, cruisers patrolled higher, their guns locked on escape routes, every corridor sealed, every chance of retreat crushed before it could form. The enemy commanders shouted orders, screamed that humans were just flesh, that numbers would still win. But their soldiers no longer believed. Fear had crept into their bones. In the east quarter, a column of invader troops tried to push through the ruins. They fired wild into the smoke, their voices cracking. Suddenly, the sky above them split with the roar of engines. Human gunships dropped in silence. Their weapons spoke once, twice, and the column was gone, dust settling where screams had been. Survivors in the shelters flinched at the sound, then realized it was not death falling on them but protection. Their fear bent into awe. In the command hall, the technician leaned closer to his console. Green markers spread across the map, zones secured, civilians rescued, medical stations active, each one a light in the darkness. He whispered the numbers under his breath, afraid to stop, as if his voice kept them alive. The old officer sat beside him, his eyes half closed. But when a fresh report came in of another district cleared, he smiled. The first true smile the technician had seen in days. Above the planet, the flagship loomed, its shadow sweeping across the mountains. On its command deck, the admiral studied enemy positions. His hand calm as he traced lines through the glowing display, he gave his orders without raising his voice: tighten the ring, choke them slow, block their claws before they scratch. The fleet obeyed, moving like a single body, their formation tightening, their patience endless. The invaders tried to strike the hydro stations again. A desperate push of walkers and tanks, but the humans had already predicted it. Drones lit the rich, artillery thundered, and the valley burned with the wreckage of another failed hope. In the city plaza, a group of alien children emerged from a shelter. Their eyes wide, staring at the massive human troop carriers that hovered overhead. One boy whispered, "War gods." His mother hushed him, but she did not correct him, because the sight felt true. The technician pushed back from his console at last, his body aching. He stumbled into the plaza, looked up at the sky, and saw the Armada hanging there like a second set of moons, heavy and unmoving. He felt both gratitude and fear. Gratitude because his people were alive. Fear because he understood what it meant. Humans had not come as allies, they had come as an answer. The invaders who once laughed now screamed in panic across broken comms. Surrender codes poured in, others ran, others died, their pride bleeding into the dust. And in the silence after each battle, the survivors of the alien world heard the same truth in the hum of the engines above. When the Deathworlders came, there was no balance, no halfway, only an end written in steel and fire. Dawn crept over the ruined world, pale. Light sliding across smoke and stone. The sky was streaked with ash but clearer than it had been in days. The endless thunder of bombardment was gone, replaced by a strange quiet. The kind that follows storms but still holds the smell of rain. Survivors emerged from shelters slowly, blinking against the grey morning, their eyes wide with disbelief that the city was still standing at all. They stepped into streets littered with broken machines. Enemy armor torn open like rusted shells. Walkers lying on their sides with legs twisted, enemy banners trampled into mud. Above them the Deathworlder Armada filled the horizon, carriers hanging like continents, destroyers sliding in long arcs across the upper air, their hulls glinting with dawn light. To the civilians below they looked less like ships and more like gods keeping watch. In the command hall the technician rubbed his bloodshot eyes and stared at his console. The green markers spread farther now. Entire districts marked safe. Corridors wide and clear, aid stations active. He whispered the numbers again under his breath, each one like a prayer. The old officer leaned against the wall, his body frail but his eyes sharper than before. He nodded once and said, "The tide has turned." Outside the city the last fragments of the enemy tried to rally. Their generals screamed through broken comms, "Hold the factories, dig in at the mountains, we can still bleed them," but their voices shook. Their soldiers no longer believed. Fear gnawed at their spines. In the eastern factories enemy troops crouched behind walls of steel, their guns shaking, their commanders shouting threats. Then the shadows of human gunships swept over the roofs. Precision fire cut the walls apart. The humans moved in, not wild, not loud, each step deliberate, each shot final. The enemy broke within minutes, fleeing through their own smoke, surrendering with hands high, in the mountains. The last enemy carriers lifted from hidden bays. Their engines burning bright, they aimed for the upper sky, desperate to escape the noose. But waiting for them above was a wall of human destroyers, already in position, already locked. The invader captains screamed orders to punch through, but their ships shattered against the wall like waves breaking on cliffs. One by one they died, falling back in trails of fire that lit the morning like false suns. In the city plaza, alien civilians stared upward, their mouths open, some sobbing, some silent, some whispering thanks to the sky. Human medics moved among them, kneeling to tend wounds, handing out water, speaking in calm voices. Stay still, breathe. You are safe now. A girl clutched the sleeve of a human trooper, her small voice breaking as she whispered, "Are you staying?" The trooper did not answer, only placed a hand on her shoulder and moved on. Because this was not about staying, it was about finishing. In the command deck of the flagship, the Admiral studied the last red blips on the map, the scattered survivors of the once proud enemy fleet. He lifted his hand, his voice calm, final sweep, no stragglers, no escape, and the Armada moved as one. Missiles streaked across the sky, railguns whispered, enemy signals blinked out one by one until the map was clean. Silence followed. A silence so heavy it seemed to press on the chest of every soul alive. The war was not over everywhere, but here, now, it was ended. The technician stepped out of the command hall and into the plaza, his body weak, his lungs full of ash. He looked up at the sky and felt the weight of it. The Armada above, the broken enemy below, the survivors around him, alive, trembling, but alive. He whispered to himself, "They came," and the words felt both like relief and a warning, because he understood, the Deathworlders did not come to fight beside you. They came to end wars, and in the quiet after dawn, with the enemy broken and the city breathing again, the galaxy itself began to whisper the same truth. When humanity moves, the war does not continue, it stops.